impacted based on work, stress, life, community, family, all of those things. Whereas mental illness is an actual disruption to your ability to manage your mental health. So every day that you wake up, you have a physical body and you have a mental self. If you have a mental illness, something is impacting your capacity to function day in and day out effectively. So if you have a physical illness, such as, let's say, diabetes, right? Diabetes does not define your body. However, it is a disruption to how you choose to eat. And you've got to make modifications to ensure your survival, to ensure that you have the best life that you can possibly live. All right, so let's do a quick icebreaker. And this goes for the panelists as well as anyone in the audience who is willing to answer. Let's hear one thing that you either eat or drink too much of. I'm not going first.
I'll go first.
Okay.
One thing I eat too much is pizza.
Ah, pizza. All right. Who else wants to share?
Sitawa here, I drink too much tea, like even when it's hot, and I drink hot tea, not cold tea. I don't get the concept of cold tea. Tea is meant to be hot, so I drink a lot of hot tea.
I can relate to that because I believe coffee is meant to be hot as well.
Bread, anything bread-like. Give me bread.
Okay. Who else?
I'll go.
Mm-hmm.
I eat way too many potatoes. Potato chips, French fries, mashed potato, any form of potato.
All right, that's a good one.
Fran, I eat way too much cucumbers. So I eat it as a snack. I put it on everything. I even mix it with ketchup. So yeah, sorry.
Don't apologize. That's definitely different. I almost feel like you can't eat too many cucumbers. So that's interesting.
Oh, really? Well, I do. I feel like I do. It's everywhere.
Okay, that's different.
I drink too much passion fruit juice. The Welsh passion fruit juice, too much sugar. I drink too much of that.
Okay. Passion fruit juice. All right.
I definitely agree with the bread statement. You know how you say the bread of life? Mine was life is bread. I love bread.
Thank you for sharing that. We've got 2 bread lovers in the house. Let's see if we can get one more person.
Pasta. If it has sauce, cheese, it could be linguine, spaghetti, lasagna, pasta. Too much pasta.
All right, we've got a pasta lover. Awesome, thank you all. All right, so on this, here we go. On this next slide, just really quickly, the stigma around mental health affects countless people worldwide, particularly on the continent of Africa. A couple of years ago, and this is a quote, so I actually should have put quotations, I apologize. A couple of years ago, I met a young man who lost 9 years of his life chained up in a small tin shed in his family's backyard after he showed signs of schizophrenia and major depressive disorder. The young man would have been locked up even longer if the district officials hadn't stumbled upon him and seen his haunted eyes through the shed's rusty slants. Alarmed, they pulled him out and took him to a nearby health center. I cried when he shared his story. I could see that the experience would that sentence doesn't make sense, would like to stay with him for a long time, and how his family felt terrible about the part that they had played. His mother, speaking with tears, heavy in her heart, said that locking him up had been the only way to appease their neighbors. This was from a Ugandan article that I pulled out, and the title of that article is, there is a lot of stigma around mental health, but we're turning the tide. So we're going to dive right into our very first question. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lead by calling out the panel members to respond, and then we'll go to the audience if we do have that time. So the first question, why do Africans and Africans within the diaspora, so we're talking about African Americans, Africans on the continent, Caribbeans, Afro-Latinos, struggle to believe that mental illness is a real thing? We'll start with Adama.
I know in regards to Senegal, when it comes to mental illness, there's still a low demand in even acknowledging what mental illness is. As a whole, in regards to Senegal, we probably have all of 20 psychiatric hospitals, 5 of which are actually in the capital. And oftentimes if someone is to demonstrate some symptoms regarding mental health, they're quicker to go the traditional route and trying to go culturally and doing rituals rather than actually acknowledging that the individual in question does have mental health symptoms. So I know in regards to Senegal, it's still a very scarce subject, and there's a low demand and also a platform and even acknowledging that it exists.
Thank you. Teddy, what are your thoughts?
Well, growing up in a very religious home, I was raised in a strict Pentecostal holiness church, and spirituality is something I think that's all there is at times. It's either we're fine or an evil or the devil has overtaken you in some way, and we can solve that. So I think I shared with you, Natasha, a lot of, I don't know where this statement came from in pop culture, but it started to become a thing where people would say, all we need is Jesus and Oprah, like and so that's what, those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll be coming back to that. How about you, Franklin? What are your thoughts?
To piggyback off of what he said, I definitely believe that religion plays a huge role in believing in, the aspect of mental health and seeking help and all that stuff, because people believe that God could cure anything, and since mental health is more of it's more about perspective, even though it isn't, but in their opinion, it's more about perspective, because they feel like if someone is acting funny, God can fix it. So I definitely feel like religion plays a very huge role in accepting it. But
okay. Thank you. Based on what both Teddy and Franklin said, it sounds like a theme, as well as Adama, it sounds like a theme is religiosity encompasses fixing and changing, which becomes that barrier from recognizing that the human body, the human mind has the capacity to also work for ourselves, right? And that there are things that we also need to do, things that we also need to acknowledge to be able to be in a healthier space. And we will be going back to that statement, Teddy, of all I need is Jesus and Oprah, because I slid that in there. Edney, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts stem between Adama and Teddy. Being Haitian, it's usually the two. If someone has any type of mental illness, it's either voodoo, the devil, or someone from their family or a neighbor, or someone hates them and they sent some negative spirit to, destroy them. And also growing up in church, it's that Jesus can fix anything. If you have, and then I feel like the Haitian church culture is just, that's another thing to unveil, but it's usually like if you have any type of mental illness, you're not praying enough, so that's why this is happening, or your relationship to Christ is not strong enough, that's why it's happening, or you have 1 foot in or 1 foot out. That's what they refuse to acknowledge. Just the human being, I feel, is refused to acknowledge on both sides. It's refused to acknowledge on those that believe in voodoo, that think it's just, you know, the devil or a negative spirit that's sent to destroy you. And the same thing in the church, they refuse to acknowledge the human. It's like, well, if you're dealing with this, then you're not praying enough, or you don't have a strong relationship with Jesus, or you're turning away from Jesus, so this is a punishment for why you're going through what you're going through, or thinking the way you're thinking. So it's the mixture. I just think it's the removement. They remove the human being and just try to just place it all on spirits. So being Haitian is both that you experience and just refusing to acknowledge it. And then the story you shared about the guy that was chained, that happened to one of our family members growing up in Haiti. He was chained for years because of schizophrenia disorder and all things he was dealing with, and they didn't know how to deal with it, so they literally chained him and just did spiritual like rituals, hoping, you know, the spirits would remove that from him. And unfortunately, he got himself out, and so this day we don't know where he is. So it's just very toxic.
Thank you, Edney. I appreciate that. Precious, can you share what your thoughts are as well?
Well, I think part of it is acknowledging that it is a mental illness. You know, there are people who will say, no, this is not mental illness, it's just weakness. They label it other things than what it truly is. And then the aspect of, oh, my family, what will my family think of if I say I have a mental illness? It's not wanting to disappoint your family, not wanting to put your family in the spot, quote unquote. So I think that's part of the struggle of even acknowledging that it is a mental illness, and it is an illness with solutions, medical solutions. And part of that also could be the family doesn't know that there are medical solutions to the illness.
Right. Thank you for saying that. That's so important, because the lack of knowledge incites fear. And when we don't know that there are medical solutions, it becomes scarier than it needs to be. So absolutely. Chinomso, how about you? What do you think about this question?
In addition to what the other panelists mentioned, I was about to make a point. I think the name is Vita in the group, saying that mental health is not tangible. I think we really struggle to, make sense of something that we can't feel, right? So if you have an injured knee, like I can see that, I can feel that, but I think we have such a hard time understanding that mental health is real. And also, if you think about it from the standpoint of, if they were to acknowledge that mental health is real, Africans care a lot about perception, right? Then if we were to say that this situation is real, then that means is saying something bad about my family, or we haven't tried enough as a parent, or we're cursed, or which kind of ties into the whole religious notion of, well, you're not praying enough, therefore this is a result of not doing X, Y, and Z.
Thank you. Sitawa, how about you? What are your thoughts on this question?
I agree with everything everyone else has said, but then I'll go back to sorry, I forgot his name, the last person who spoke.
Chinomso?
Yes, it's about having language. So we don't have language to say what is happening. And as he said, it's very intangible. And so why I would say people look at religion and spirits, so not necessarily just religion and not necessarily just Christianity, but the whole spirituality way of not just explaining mental health and mental illness, but also looking for answers in it. Because most of the time, if I can explain something from a scientific point of view, I'm most likely to start looking for a scientific way of fixing that. And so if I think of spirits as things I cannot see, I cannot touch, then there's this illness that I cannot see and I cannot touch, I will equate it to the nearest thing that I know falls under that. And that's why sometimes spirits and spirituality becomes how to explain it. And so there's no language to explain what mental health is. And if most of us can think about it, what do you call depression in your native languages? What do you call schizophrenia? What do you call bipolar. Most likely we don't have one word for these things. We have a variety of explanations, which are more like us trying to just describe the signs and symptoms that we see, but we don't have a definite one. But we have something we can associate with, and that's what we know when we think about someone being possessed. And so when we think about someone going through schizophrenia, and the signs and symptoms they portray are what we as people from the African continent would equate to possession. And so those signs and symptoms of quote unquote possession look like what someone will go through when they're going through schizophrenia or mania. And so we say it's something spiritual because that's what we can relate to. And so we think the only other way to deal with it is from a spiritual point of view. And so that's why we're saying you need to pray more if you're more church oriented, or we think, oh, we need to go to prayer camps. And that's why in some countries they have actual places where people are locked up. So it's not just that Ugandan story. I've been to Ghana and Nigeria where people are actually locked up in prayer camps where parents take their kids there. And so
Satal, I apologize. We're going to move on to the next question, but I do appreciate that because all of you guys have made very valid points. Before we continue, something I would like each of you guys to keep in the back of your minds. So the African diaspora, as we know, it begins on the continent and we dispersed. So a lot of these issues that we are seeing on the continent, we are also seeing where? Everywhere else to varying degrees, right? So there are different parts of the world that have made a little bit more progress than maybe we've made on the continent, but the same issues still exist, just at a varying degree. So we're going to go on to the next question. Well, actually, it's not a question. Another statement that I want you guys to just listen to before we move on to the next question. Many people with psychiatric disorders have been struggling, sorry, let me move this out the way so I can see, have been struggling for years with spiritual healers or herbalists and have not been receiving medical treatment. So just as many of you guys have already mentioned. I have even seen individuals who, again, were chained or locked up at home because of the social stigma of fear of aggressive behavior. But when people accept that these are medical conditions and we treat these patients, they finally will have relief from their symptoms and live normally within their communities. And this can be found at mfs.org. It's a Liberian website. And the title of that article is Providing Psychiatric Care Close to Home. All right, so the statement that Teddy had stated earlier, all I need is Jesus and Oprah. So we've already started talking about this. I'm gonna call on 3 panelists and then I'm gonna give the opportunity for a couple of audience members as well. So Teddy, since this was kind of your forefront here, what does this even mean?
It's a statement that says, you know, okay, maybe we do need to talk a little bit about something, and every now and then, or get a good cry out every now and then, you know, Oprah, you know, but for the most part, our faith should be strong enough, and because God is not, God is not weak, so we shouldn't be weak. You know, our faith should be strong, and outside of that, there really shouldn't be anything else outside of that. That's all we need. And there was this idea growing up that, you're either dealing with it in the church house, or something that I saw too in my family is watching people experience, what is the word that I'm looking for? Living vicariously through people on TV, like Oprah, and people that would attend the show and that would get help, live help, live counseling. And so that's what I've experienced it as growing up. That's all and I've heard people say that, jokingly, but many a truth is said in jest.
Thank you for sharing that. That is something I see as well in practice. It's either the church, or it's either on this really large scale where everyone is watching it happen, because people are living vicariously through with the celebrity that comes with it. So Thank you for pointing that out. Franklin, what are your thoughts on this particular statement?
I actually have a personal experience with that recently. So I'm in therapy, and I had to meet with my therapist at a certain time. So I also had a family meeting. But again, for me, therapy is like was more important than that meeting. So I stated that, hey, I have therapy. And they're like, why are you even going to that thing? You're not crazy. And I was like, well, there are a lot of things that have happened in my life that I would like to unpack. For one, the Civil War. Liberia went through a civil war for over a decade. And it's not natural to see your friends become child soldiers and all these things. And I had a family member say, just pray, like, why do you feel like you need to have another person tell you what to do? Why can't you just pray about it? And I said, well, I feel like God created this person to help me unpack it so I can be better for you, So I definitely, it resonates when I hear that. For Oprah, I'm appreciative that, celebrities are now creating more awareness for mental health. So people are feeling like it's okay to actually talk about these things now. Because before, Oprah was just because everyone loved Oprah because for whatever reasons, they associate happiness. So if you're feeling sad, you can be happy because a certain celebrity is happy. But I'm just appreciative of the fact now that a lot of celebrities are talking about their struggles and how they navigate life through being aware. And that in turn has to do with, therapy and mental health awareness and all that stuff. So yeah.
Okay. Awesome, thank you, appreciate that. Let's have Precious. Tell us what you think about this particular statement.
Okay, I think everybody has pretty much said most of what I would have to say, but just to add is just realizing that even the celebrities, again, they have their own struggles. They're just a human being. They've been either fortunate enough to be in a spotlight where they can be very influential, they have the money, you're living through them. But I think another aspect of that would be, even if they're in the spotlight, in your own family, you are in the spotlight. Maybe you also, that's the way I look at it, is I have this space to impact the people around me. So I can be my own, quote unquote, Oprah, the people around me. So maybe I need to do right. I need to be an example. I need to do the right thing. That's how I'm sort of looking at it.
Okay, I appreciate that perspective, a little bit different. So that was good. All right, so actually, before we move on to that next question, I'm sorry, I'm going way too quickly here. Let me get a couple of folks in the audience. Anyone else who would like to share?
I'm wondering if Natasha, I could just add to what was being said when we're talking about that very statement. What it means to me when I hear that all you need is God and Oprah, number one, it's enough that we sit in front of the television screen and Oprah will tell us what to do and we'll be fine. And when that doesn't work, we'll just pray and that will work.
Right.
But I'm wondering if everybody realizes how far reaching that statement is. Because in the position that I am in, where I am working for a court and we are trying very hard to decriminalize mental health, but we can't do it if people are refusing the help that the court is willing to give through a specialty docket, whether it be substance abuse or now the behavioral health docket. And that's one of the reasons that I'm here today, is we need help. We need, what do we do? Because the help is there and it's being offered, but we can't make people, they would rather go to jail than get the help that's being offered to them. They'd rather go through a regular docket.
Thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. That, that's very layered. One of it is, it starts from culture, no matter where it is that you reside. If you do not believe, if you believe it's only two ends of the spectrum, religiosity, religion, Oprah, celebrities. If you believe that those are the only two options, everything that falls in between is non-existent, no matter how much a person will push. And so it starts from our communities, not only decriminalizing, but destigmatizing. If we don't destigmatize, we cannot decriminalize. If we don't let people know that you can have Jesus and Oprah and therapy, right? Or that you can have Oprah and a psychiatrist, and that having a combination of both is okay, as opposed to teaching that it's either or, we cannot get to that point of decriminalizing, or people or patients understanding that they can benefit and change their lives and be healthier if, you know, they accept outpatient therapy, if they accept medication management and those kinds of things. So thank you for adding that piece. All right, so this question is going to go to all members of the panel. In addition to, we've already been talking about this, in addition to prayer, how else do I help my loved ones while they are working on their mental health? And we'll start with Edney.
In addition to prayer, I think you need to just be there for the person, not there to tell them how they should fix their issues or how they should fix what they're going through, with saying statements that I don't like to hear when people tell people when they're trying to help them is, if it were me, because it's not you, so you should not ever tell the person that. And just be there and listen to how the person needs you to be there. Don't just assume, or I'm going to like be on their shoulders every second, because, you know, I don't want them to do anything to hurt themselves and such like that, because then you'll make the person feel like, you know, you don't even trust them to continue to do that work on themselves. So just to be there, but just open up, ask questions. If you don't know what to do, ask the person, what would you like me to do? How would you like me to support you? And I think that's key. Don't just assume this is what I'm going to do, or don't be too scared to ask certain questions because you don't want the person to go crazy, because that's what we like to use. Don't be too scared to ask the question. Just be very real, be human. Just imagine if you were going through it, how would you want people to approach you? So approach with care, of course. And if you don't know something, it's okay to say, hey, you know, I'm not familiar with mental illness. I'm not familiar with what you're going through, but I really want to be there for you. I really want to support you while you're going through what you're going through and making the change to get better, however that is for you. And however that looks like to you, how can I be of help? And can you educate me on what's going on, your diagnosis, or just how you're feeling? Can you just help me understand so I could be there for you? I think as simple as that. Sometimes we overthink how we can support and help people, when it's really as simple as, if you don't know, it's okay to admit that I don't know what you're going through and I don't know anything about it. Can you help me understand in order to help you? And how do you want me to help you? How do you want me to be there for you? That's the right thing.
Thank you for saying that. We do often overthink how we can help a person, and sometimes we end up being a lot more intrusive and more damaging than we intend to be. Before we go on to the next panelist, something else I want you guys to keep in mind, and that I often say to the families that I work with: if you believe in the power of prayer, we often, well, I would say generally, we accept that we're probably going to wait a period of time, correct, before our prayers are answered. Typically with prayer, we understand I could be praying for this thing for a few months, for a few years, maybe even a decade. But when it comes to mental health, and we know that there's a medical piece to it, we want that automatic fix, right? And so, okay, you're telling me you're bipolar, you went to the therapist, and I hear parents say this all the time: why are you still acting like that, right? You say you're depressed, you're now on Zoloft. 2 weeks later, I hear parents say, I don't understand why she's still sad. And it's so important to recognize that just like prayer is a process, so is mental health, and so is healing. Precious, what are your thoughts on this question?
I think the biggest thing is, one, like Edney said, just being there. When you're there, knowing when to ask questions. How do you want me to help you? How can I help you? And to allow them to feel the feelings they're feeling at that moment, because if it means they just feel like crying, allow them to cry at that moment. And then what I typically say to a dear friend of mine is, okay, You have cried. Do you want to put some words into those tears? So we can have a conversation. If you don't want to, that's okay. But to allow them to feel what they're feeling at that moment, if they're in your presence, I think, in addition to, again, what has already been mentioned.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sitawa, how about you?
I'll talk from the perspective of both as someone who provides mental health services, but also from the perspective of someone who's lived with bipolar, and just some of the things that have worked for me. One of the things I want to point out, it's not all the time that we want to start with prayer. So there are times it is, we'll pray later. Let's skip to other things. And one of the things I've seen that have worked for me, especially with my friends, is never giving up on me. That they know that I won't show up, that I won't answer their calls, that I won't do anything. But there's just that feeling of I matter when I know that despite all those things, they're always going to be there for me, because they always come through. They'll always ask, even when I don't respond, they'll always ask, do you want to go out? Do you want to do this? And they know I will say no, but they don't give up. They don't force things on me. They'll just say, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? But then there's
continued support.
Yeah. And then there's the level also of accountability, where now they say, okay, let's try do this. You don't have to do it all the way, but just do as much as you can. So always being there, that's been good.
Okay, thank you so much. Chinum, so what are your thoughts on this question? Still with us? Oh, this is the time where he stepped away. Okay, sorry about that. Teddy, how about you?
Well, I'll share from the perspective of a child with a parent that is dealing with mental illness as a result and a breakdown in their mental health. So my father had a breakdown in his mental health when I was around 9 years old. And I will say that what is appreciated is, yes, just being present, not only with the person that is dealing specifically with the mental illness, but also those that are close to that person, because they may not know how to process. I was 9 years old. I didn't have a whole lot of people who were able to ask specific questions or, check on me in a very specific way, because it was also new to us. But we were blessed to have, my older siblings stepping to the forefront, my father's siblings, checking in, and not just checking in and stopping by, but being involved to a degree that my father wasn't able to at the time think for himself in that regard. I just want to shout out my Aunt Bessie, one of my dad's siblings, who was very adamant about speaking with the doctors, speaking with them during my father's stay at an institution or at the hospital that he was at for only a few days due to the involuntary Baker Act. But she was very adamant about asking questions, even though a lot of her questions didn't get answered. But it takes those types of people that are making sure that people aren't being walked over, stepped over, or just mishandled just because they don't know something. And again, for the older siblings and my dad's other siblings and my mom's siblings that rallied around us and her through that difficult time to say, I have no clue what to do, but I'm here to serve as emotional support and also helping might look like not asking a lot of questions in the way of what's going on, almost, because it can also, when you don't know a whole lot of what's going on yourself and you're being asked that, it can feel like an accusation. Why is this happening? Why, like what? And that might not be the intention. So yeah, those are a few ways in my opinion and from my perspective that others
Thank
can
you,
help.
Teddy. Appreciate that. Adama, how about you on this question?
I'll speak from personal experience and from my childhood and growing up and having to break these generational curses for the sake of the sanity for myself and my siblings in growing up, because in our household, suppression is what was welcome and expression of emotions was not. It was a forbidden subject. And so when we were dealing with things, it was almost, we had to internalize. We couldn't speak on it, we couldn't show it, or we were penalized for it, or when mental health was addressed in regards to possible suicidal ideations, it was, how would Allah feel? Because I'm Muslim. So for us, it was, how would Allah feel about this? Allah doesn't condone this. It wasn't acknowledging the issue at hand or seeking additional assistance. So when a situation occurred within my family in regards to suicidal ideations, I took the step forward in actually making the call, and my sibling ended up being entered into a inpatient psychiatric hospital for some time, and my family was upset with me and essentially almost shut me out because I did such a thing. It wasn't that I took the step in ensuring that my sibling was seeking help. It was more so of, how could you? And it was those situations that even empowered me and pushed me to continue to look into mental health and be so passionate about wanting to help others, because I wanted to break those general curses and actually create a platform where it was welcomed. And I know now it went from when I first started my social work degree that, oh, you want to help crazy people, that's what you want to do. And now I created a platform where my siblings are able to speak on their emotions. They're not internalized, and they're practicing healthier practices, because what we have been practicing throughout our childhood was not healthy for any of us. So that's my standpoint. I don't hear
Natasha, you must have
There we go. I was just running my gums. But in short, I agree with you, Adama. All right, Franklin, how about you on this one?
For one, I definitely feel like it's really important to not project your experience on that person. A lot of times I feel like whenever, let's say someone is going through an episode that makes them feel depressed, a lot of times people project when they might have gone through that and say, it's probably not that serious, or so it's very important to stay neutral. And also like research, kind of like from a neutral standpoint, it's important to just research and see, okay, how is this person, educate yourself, because I don't believe that anything is coincidental. I feel like every experience we have is a teaching moment, whether it's you being the one experiencing it or someone in your life that is experiencing it. So it's important to just take that moment to educate yourself and stay neutral and just be there and ask, like, how can I, as opposed to just, because a lot of times, depending on that person's personality, they might not want you to just pry on them, or they might just want distance. And for one, I don't, when I'm going through something, I don't like to feel vulnerable to the point where, I'm expressing that. I like to kind of digest it and figure out how I can express it. But I think that it makes it worse when someone is like, oh, so what's going on? And, just create a safe space for that person to be able to come as they are. And in that time, the best way you can send good vibes to them, but also like just educate yourself about what is going on. So yeah, that's my take on that.
Thank you for that, Franklin. So the common theme that I'm hearing is everyone responds differently to trauma, to depression, to events, whatever it may be. And one of the best ways of being able to support a person, and partly, is knowing who they are. But if you don't know who they are, you're unsure of who they are, don't be afraid to ask, what do you need from me? All right, so we'll go to Sitawa and then Chinomso to answer this question before we move on.
Oh, I already spoke.
Oh, okay. All right. So then Chinomso is left. What do you think about this question? In addition to praying, how else do I help my loved ones while they work on their mental health?
I mean, I think the first step is to not make it about you. It's always important to step back and ask yourself questions like, how does this make sense from their perspective, right? A lot of times people are not really seeking to be fixed. They want to be understood first. So if we get a better understanding of what a person is dealing with, then that puts us in the best position to help them. Speaking from a standpoint of a sister with a bipolar diagnosis, it's not easy, and it hasn't been easy. But it's always been important to just be present. Sometimes as people just want you to be present. You may not have the right words to say, but one thing that they can always rely on is that you were there in some shape or fashion when they needed you.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. All of you guys dropped some gems there, so thank you for that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and watch a video next. Let's see. After the commercial.
You brought us last night, a Twin Cities mother sharing her painful truth about an unthinkable crime she committed against her own kids.
And you may remember her name, Naomi Gaines. In 2003, she tried to end the lives of her twin boys. I sat down with her to talk about what happened, how she has moved on, and what she's trying to do now to help others.
Okay, there we go, come on. Sometimes the strings get tired and they require a little bit more time.
Throughout life, Naomi Gaines has had time
15 years.
fine-tuning fears that forced her to break.
I was a woman back in 2003, July 4th, drove to the Taste of Minnesota, had my twins in a double stroller, walked down on the bridge and threw them over before jumping in myself after.
I apologize. Are you guys able to see the video?
That was me.
Okay, hold on 1 second.
An innocent bystander jumped in the water and saved me and saved one of my sons. The other one drowned. It couldn't save him.
You guys can hear it though.
Naomi was diagnosed with postpartum psychosis, bipolar, and schizoaffective disorder.
When I mentioned I'm depressed, I'm down. Oh, girl, you a strong Black woman. You can take this. I wasn't allowed to not be happy.
Naomi was convicted of second-degree murder and second-degree attempted murder. She spent 15 years in prison, including time at a mental health treatment facility.
I got the most help from my mental illness while incarcerated. That's when the prevention, the classes, the groups, the therapy, the medication happened after it was already too late for my son. I spent 12 and a half years in Shakopee.
Now Naomi is on a mission to make sure others get help.
I wasn't this monster everybody made me out to be.
She works part-time at the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Minnesota, educating people, especially African Americans, about treating the illness.
What I wouldn't give to go back and say, I'm not okay, and I need help, to actually express that at the beginning.
There's somebody watching right now who wants to end it all. What do you say to them?
If there is another Naomi Gaines out there struggling, you're not alone. It is not a character flaw. It is not a weakness to ask for help. That is actually a strength. You can be so strong in yourself and be walking around and doing everything and being everything to everybody. But if your compassion and your love doesn't include yourself, it is incomplete.
That day, a stranger jumped in to save Naomi and her son. 10 years later, while she was in prison, she received a letter from him. It said in part, "You thought I saved you, but you saved me. I was there to jump too."
All
One in
right,
5
guys.
adults in the US
I apologize
experiences
that
mental
video did
illness.
not
That's about
show.
20%. It's probably someone you know.
Having some
And in the
technical
Black
difficulties on
community,
my
the
end.
stigma surrounding mental illness is magnified.
All right, I'm gonna put this slide back up. As I am figuring out myself on this end, can you guys go ahead, whoever would like to share? I know you couldn't see, but share what you were hearing.
I'll go fast. There's a line where she says that she got the most help for her mental health when she went to prison, which I found to be very ironic, that the services are not available for people out here, that it had to be in such a setting for her to be able to get the support and the help that she needed. And that just goes into a conversation, I don't know if we'll have later on, about policy and funding and management of mental health on a larger scale, and how this conversation should not just be about how we have it within our communities, our household, but then how do we spread it to reach the positions of policy, and how services are provided and to whom those services are provided and how they're available, accessible, how they're affordable to everybody. So yeah, that's just a whole conversation that I think we need a whole new forum. Rita and Natasha, you need to put that together for us to talk about policy, funding, right, and all those things. Yeah.
You know, you made a valid point. It is a whole other conversation. It's probably more of an ongoing dialogue, but I absolutely agree with you, for sure. All right, so this next statement here, there isn't really a formal language of mental health in Haiti. Florence St. Jean, the executive director and founder of Global Trauma Research, Inc., which leads the Haiti Trauma Project, he said, something simple like the word depression. The symptoms that we use to diagnose someone with that diagnosis in the United States will not make sense for the people of Haiti. They don't exhibit the same type of symptoms, so whatever diagnosis is given will not hold. I would like the audience to chime in first before we go to our panel members. Anyone from the audience?
Hello, this is Craig DeLarge. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm here with the Digital Mental Health Project, and Satawa, thanks for the invitation. It's so interesting to read this statement. I just finished taking a community mental health course as a part of a Masters of Public Health program that I'm in, and I remember reading research that was shocking to me about how inadequate the DSM that we use here in the West for identifying mental disorders can be in other cultures in different parts of the world. And so I get that. I recall, because I worked in the pharma industry for many years, that when pharma companies started selling antidepressants in Japan, they found that the Japanese did not actually have a word for depression. And the industry taught the population that depression is when your soul has a cold. And then they went on, whatever you think about the pharma industry, one way or the other, to be quite successful in teaching the Japanese people to take antidepressants. But that's just a story that comes immediately to mind that resonates with this point right here. And I'll stop at that to give other people an opportunity.
Thank you so much for that. Just to piggyback off of that, that reminds me of an experience, and I was still living in Rhode Island, newly fresh into the field, and I was working with a family from Liberia. And similar to what Franklin had shared, she had witnessed the Civil War. She had a number of children who she had witnessed, pass in front of her. And she, from my perspective and experience, had been misdiagnosed because they did not understand that symptoms of grief can present differently from culture to culture. And so oftentimes what we see, even amongst, here amongst African Americans, when an African American or an African or, whoever is experiencing grief, as we know, sometimes we may wail, right? We may drop to the floor. We may scream. We may do all of these things that are attached to generations back of culture and how we express ourselves. And then what happens is grief sometimes is misdiagnosed for psychosis, or is misdiagnosed for schizoaffective disorder, or is misdiagnosed for a number of other things, but they're never seen to be grieving because the cultural competency and the cultural aspect has been left out. And when a culture doesn't have a word for something, how can you effectively diagnose? Anyone else in the audience who would like to chime in on this?
This is,
Go ahead.
This is yet another thing that we are having trouble with within the Supreme Court of Virginia, in even creating the specialty dockets and who will get that assistance. We, in the city of Chesapeake, were very lucky that we could fit in under the DSM a behavioral health docket. We also need in this area a veterans docket, but because culturally people do not express that trauma in the same way, but we want to put it on that same scale to say, this is a need. We were lucky to get the behavioral health. We did not get the veterans docket because the Supreme Court says there isn't a need for one because veterans don't break the law. We know that that's not true, but because there's such a stigma with a veteran to say, I need help with I need help mentally, it's not going to show up. I would say the majority of people who do right now go through the behavioral health docket and get that help are people of color, are mainly African Americans. But again, we have that trouble because the way they are diagnosed to get into the program, what makes them legally and mentally fit or eligible for the program is not the language that they themselves would use. So they're going to say, I don't need this help. I don't fit into that.
Makes absolute sense. Absolutely. Let's see, Chinomso, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I do agree. I think even in Nigeria, when it comes to mental health, vocabulary is very important. I recall having a conversation with this Nigerian nurse practitioner in the psych department, and she was just saying that when it came to talking to her clients about seeing like a therapist, that was a little off-putting. But if she used a word like counselor or just something that someone that's going to help you, that they tended to respond more positively. And even with my dad, towards the end of his life, he was extremely anxious, but he would never say anxiety. He would say my nerves, right? So I think some of the vocabulary around mental health has been we find to be stigmatizing. So I think the goal is just to find something that reflects us, that also empowers us in that process.
Absolutely agree with you. Edney, our Haitian sister, this is something for you that you already touched base on. Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, it's being Haitian, growing up Haitian, it's the lack of knowledge and lack of education regarding mental illness, mental health in the Haitian community. That you can't even talk about that before in 1 second somebody calls you crazy. The only word we have in my culture to describe any type of mental illness or you're not feeling well mentally is crazy. The minute someone is not acting normal or they're going through any type of mental illness or mental health issues, they're crazy. That's how they'll describe someone. That's why if you go to Haiti, you see a lot of people roaming the streets, and you'll hear their stories like, oh, their families kicked them out because they were crazy, so the families couldn't handle it, or it's just like, it's crazy. That's literally the only word we have in the culture, unfortunately, due to lack of knowledge and lack of education, to describe that. It's just crazy. The person's crazy. If someone's hospitalized because of a mental illness, oh, did you hear this person's in the hospital? Oh my God, they went crazy. That's the only thing. And if you try to describe it how it really is, they just tell you like, no, this person, it goes back to prayer.
Right.
It goes back to voodoo, the spirits. It just always go back to that. And it's just on our part as this generation is just doing the work to teach each other and the older generation, and then the generation that's coming after us, and then it keeps going. Like the wording, of course, that knowledge is very, very, very important, and that's the biggest issue, because we don't have that knowledge. Well, there's that knowledge now, but it's so small, and then just people willing to talk about it, because people are not willing in the Haitian culture. Even sitting down with my mom, it took so long to have her understand mental illness, because it went back to like, if I would cry, oh, you're crying, you don't pray enough. So it takes so long to even just for them to sit down and try to talk about it, because they equate it to crazy so much that you can't, it's either you're human or you're crazy. It doesn't make sense. Like you can't have emotions, because if your emotions doesn't stem with the normal, you're crazy. Unfortunately, that's literally the only word. You can ask any Haitian person that doesn't have the knowledge about mental illness, mental health. They'll tell you this person is acting this way because they're crazy, or this person went to the hospital. Did you hear so-and-so's in the hospital? They're crazy.
I'm gonna interrupt you really quickly so we can move on to the next question. But
Okay.
what I'm hearing you say, and what I'm collectively hearing all of us say, is that when there's limited language, there's limited growth.
Yes.
Right. So first comes the education, then comes the language, or pretty much simultaneous. And then with that comes growth. Because if we don't have a word to describe it, you're not going to speak. You're going to be afraid to speak. And those who are listening are going to be afraid to accept.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This kind of piggybacks off of where you just left off, Edney. This statement says, and I would like for each panel member, and I'm going to start with Adama, to finish this statement if you are comfortable. So please know it's not an obligation. I wanted my mother or my father to know that I felt, and then you can fill that in, but.
I wanted my mother to know I felt, but so in saying, just to get clarification, but in saying what she didn't acknowledge?
So I really should have put a line between felt and but. So I wanted my mother or father to know I felt, fill in that part, but, and then fill in that part.
Okay. So I wanted my mother to know I felt belittled and unworthy, but through time and then growing up, I found myself and found who I am and learned to love myself and recognize the queen that I am today.
I love it. Thank you. That's awesome. Teddy, how about you?
I wanted my mother and father to know that I felt rejected, but I understand now that they were doing the best they could with what they were taught.
That's powerful. Franklin.
I wanted my mother and father to know that I felt disregarded, but instead, as time went by and I tried to communicate that through my actions, they felt it was more an insult to their parenting, and it had nothing to do with that.
That's common, isn't it? Satawa.
I was trying to think through. I wanted my mother and father to know that I felt alone, but I now see that they also felt alone having a daughter with a mental health diagnosis.
Thank you for sharing that. Precious?
I wanted my father and my family to know that I was depressed. I didn't know that I was depressed. I did not have words to describe depression and did not know what depression was. But I also didn't know whether they would understand what that meant because I didn't know what I was going through. I knew I felt something, but I didn't know how to tell them.
Thank you. Shinomso?
Yes, I wanted my parents to I guess for me to be seen, but I also had to be cognizant that I was hiding myself from myself, so it wasn't fair for me to expect them to see me in that light. But over the years, through like a level of self-awareness, then there's a realization that you're responsible for your feelings and how you communicate those feelings.
Definitely. Thank you for that. Edney, how about you?
I wanted my parents to understand that I felt betrayed and abandoned by both. But now that I'm older and hearing their past experiences and the way they grew up, they were also betrayed and abandoned. So they couldn't offer me much on the human level as their child other than that. Though they offered a lot, but I'm talking just the betrayal and abandonment.
Right. Thank you for that. Let's get a couple of folks in the audience who are willing to finish this statement.
Please identify yourself first so we can find you.
No one?
Doreen.
Okay.
I would say I wanted my mother to know that I felt afraid and abandoned, but I do understand that she also suffering from some of the same issues, was doing the best that she could.
Thank you.
Thank you. And someone also wrote in the chat, I wanted my mother to know I felt unappreciated, but she was overwhelmed as a single parent of 3. Her attention was focused on my younger siblings.
Okay.
That was from me, Amani.
Yes.
Thank you, Amani. All right, so a quick check-in. How are we all doing right now? Get like a thumbs up, doing all right? Not too much, terrible? Thumbs up. Let me go through all of the faces and see. Okay, I like someone used their emoji thumbs up. Awesome. All right, so this next slide, which comes from an article from Senegal titled Policy Perspectives and Attitudes Towards Mental Health Treatment in Rural Senegal. 2 important factors must be considered in understanding the community's attitude about psychiatric treatment for mental illness. One is the feeling among many people that the discipline of psychiatry was forced upon Africa by Europeans, and that many people want to reaffirm their cultural roots. So before I go on to the next slide, I would like to tap into Adama, who is from Senegal, and ask you what your thoughts are about this particular statement.
So I can speak from experience in when I would consistently be able to go to Senegal in the summer and the dynamic. As you all know, or may not know, French is who conquered Senegal. So when Senegal gained their independence, it was to try to get back to the culture and essentially still prioritize Senegal. And despite, you know, some characteristics of French still being a part of Senegal, such as one of the primary languages outside of Wolof is French. It's a French-speaking country. And we have a lot of places in Senegal as well that are still, you know, French-based as well from France. So with that, I think that's the primary reason that mental health is not acknowledged, or the education needed to support some of the mental health individuals in Senegal isn't having that welcome platform. And it's often gone to traditional or spiritual rather than actually acknowledging that this individual may suffer from mental health illness. And it's still a current issue in Senegal now, of where you would find a family that is quicker to go the traditional route rather than seek additional assistance or the right or navigate correctly in how to acknowledge and be support to this family member that clearly needs that attention.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, so our next question. Post-traumatic slavery disorder, another form of PTSD. For our melanated men, how do we address this? So if it's okay, I would like to target this more so to our two melanated men on the panel, and then also tap into some men who are in the audience if you guys are comfortable with sharing. We could start with you, Teddy. What do you hear in this question?
Oh man, I hear, and I'm recalling all of my thoughts and conversations concerning the thought patterns and pathologies around this topic, and seeing sort of the weight of that statement carried over until now, because it's very real. And
It's
how
a
do we
layered one,
address
isn't it?
It is a layered one, and I mean, I think about it all the time, but addressing it, as an artist, I address it the best I can with, trying to tell the stories and having personal conversations. And even now, I may never be able to get to the full weight of that question, especially in talking with my father. But I can kind of inch my way towards it and hopefully get somewhere, because it matters. And a lot of what we carry is not just our own. A lot of what we carry, I believe, in my opinion, is generational as well. And it can, unaddressed, anything can just pop up. It can pop up at any time in our lives, like any moment when you're, I think it was TD Jakes that said, be careful how you're talking to, how you're responding to a man that's like going around a major curve in his life, because it could just, one little thing could just tip him over. He's already carrying a whole lot. And I think even in how we process freedom and how we view ourselves going out into the world, and our relationship with work or working for the man, it definitely needs to be addressed, because it's like
this could possibly be another whole discussion within itself, right?
it really could.
PTSD is one thing. post-traumatic slavery disorder is another, the impact of that, and then how do we address it? So I do think that this is a loaded question, but I appreciate what you were able to get out thus far.
Yeah, it's a good one though. It's a good question.
It is a good one. Before we move on to Chinomso, is there anyone in the audience who can chime in to this particular question? And please introduce yourself first as well, so we can highlight you.
So this is Craig DeLarge again, and I'm going to jump in because nobody else spoke up. I don't want to seem to be hogging the discussion. So I put in the chat, there's a service that's being developed here in the US by Kevin Dedner. He's a good colleague of mine, called Henry Health, which is a mental health service that's being designed specifically for Black men. Kevin Dedner, sorry about that, and gets at both the wellness as well as the illness side of health when it comes to Black men, where he has this fabulous vision. What is it? He wants to, in the next 25 years, he wants to add 10 years to the average lifespan of Black men, which epidemiologists estimate is what we as Black men lose in terms of lifespan because of the incremental pressures we have on us related to our mental health. So that's one thing I just wanted to bring up, I think is really important. The other thing, and Grace and I were kind of having a sidebar on chat about this, is we need to recognize that the approach to mental health that we are often talking about and have learned is designed for modern Western cultures. And the fact is that we as a people, wherever we've been in the world, have very many traditional and effective approaches to how we create community in order to be resilient in the face of life's adversities that go back beyond, I hope this doesn't offend anyone, but I'm going to call it a Western Christianized approach. And I think that we need to be digging deeper into our historic legacies to really understand what our ancestors did to be resilient. And it's not to say that we throw the Western model out entirely, but that we shape the Western model in a way that it is more, better acculturalized, I'll call it, or indigenized to really serve our souls and our minds. And I'll leave it at that.
I really appreciate that. If I was to narrow that down to a couple of words, I'd say cultural competency.
Yes.
Amen.
And Natasha, if I could piggyback on that.
Yes,
please. Thank you so much for saying that, Craig, because exactly what you said is what we are aiming to do at TACA, Tidewater African Cultural Alliance. We obviously, even if you do have that cultural identity, you still can develop and have mental health issues. So imagine if you do not have that, how much more it would be complicated and how many more of those difficulties and problems you would have. So we obviously, Natasha and I definitely agree that mental health and mental stability, mental well-being is very, very important. But in order to get there, we also have to be culturally healthy. And that's an issue within our society and community.
Absolutely agree. Thank you to both of you guys for adding that in. All right, so we are at 3:03, and again, we want to ensure that we are respecting your time. So I'm going to, let's do this question. I will skip a couple of questions, but just because of time, but I do want us to do this one. So how do we help our parents, right? So as the younger generation, we're doing a lot of talking. We're doing a lot of legwork, doing a lot of community work. We're having conversations, we're having events, we are going to therapy. We might even be going to therapy with our families, but there are still those family members who cannot accept that when you go to therapy, like Franklin was saying, you don't need that, right? Or go to church and pray about it. Or your relationship with your higher power is not strong enough, therefore it's your fault that you are experiencing what you are. So let's start with Satawa. how do we help our families? How do we help our parents?
I would say starting the conversation from where they're at. So like someone was giving, I think it was Craig, giving the example of how the pharmaceutical companies were trying to market some of their drugs and using phrases or languages that the community they were trying to get into understands. So one, starting from where they are and the things that they get, but also holding firm to what you believe and where you're going. So there definitely will be tension at the beginning because you're sort of coming from almost 2 points of view, but then always, and I've seen this work with not just my parents, but also relatives who just didn't get what I was going through. So just starting from where they're at and slowly easing them into the conversation, knowing obviously there'll be a lot of objections, but then slowly easing them with, like describing depression using, I hate using sadness to describe depression, but then because a lot of people would readily understand sadness, then using parts of it and saying, okay, imagine that extended for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, and it's just beyond you. And so it's slowly easing them in, knowing that there'll definitely be resistance, but always keeping in mind what your end goal is. And then the last part is not suffering for it. So it gets to a point where you just decide, let's agree to disagree.
Taking care of your mental health is a part of that, right?
Yeah.
All right. Precious, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay, so this is quite interesting from two perspectives. I mean, I went through therapy when I was pregnant, and my husband at the time, ex-husband from Haiti, said to me, "You are African, you don't need therapy." Then I said, "I need it for me. Right now, I can't handle it on my own. I need it for me." So each time I would go and I would encourage him and say, "Okay, maybe you can just come in and listen. You don't have to say anything." And he said, "Well, if I go there, what will people say? You're talking about the issues in our house with other people. You're talking about our family out there." Then I said, "No, these are professional people." So, and I think the same actually works even for parents saying, "Why do you want to talk about our issues in our house with medical professionals? Why are you talking about these things?" But I think ultimately I continued going and I'm in a very good place. Talking to parents, on the other hand, requires, again, quote unquote, flowery language, but starting slowly. I think it requires knowing their history. It's foreign to them. They don't know the words to use to describe therapy. Say, "Well, sometimes you need help," just like, and you give very common examples like, you go to the pastor at church when you have something, when things are safe. But these are also people who are professionally trained who could lose their license if they did the wrong thing with the information. Right. Yes. So kind of reiterate that.
Thank you so much. Very, very valid points, especially that last part. Again, the common theme is just like we would want them to be mindful of how we feel and starting where we are, it's also important that on our end, we're mindful and start with where our family members are, because historically it is foreign, right? All right, so let's go on to this question and then I'll pose it to some of the other panelists as well as the audience. Would you suggest mental health services to your parent if you know that they will receive culturally competent care? Ethne, tell us your thoughts on this question.
Definitely. I always talk, especially to my mom, that I really want her to go to therapy. We have this conversation all the time, so I would definitely suggest it.
Okay. Franklin, how about you?
Absolutely. I am constantly having conversations about mental health awareness with my family. And for my mom, especially, I would, because I feel like a lot of the things in her, the mindset she has is strictly based off of trauma she's, in her life. And now that I have, been going to therapy and seeking help and become more self-aware, I feel like there's just so much that I could relate to her and another person could, and would make her life much better. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to answer this question? And maybe you have. We'd love to hear from someone who has recommended this and that their parents actually decided to go ahead and participate in therapy.
This is Lola. I guess I will give a thing that I started doing with my mom, because my mom is one of the type of parents that, always believe in prayer, and prayer will change everything. So I started doing this thing where I was like, okay, Mom, as we pray, let's go for walks on FaceTime. And so as we prayed and went for walks on FaceTime, we started doing two things where I was helping her with her physical health, and then she was trying to help me with spiritual health. Then as we were talking about spiritual and prayers and stuff like that, I started incorporating different things and telling her, okay, we're going to read this stuff about mental health and things that you should do as you're getting older for your mental health. And let's start talking about that as we're going for walks. So going back to, you have to talk about things that they relate to. I think you have to start with something that they're used to. So for my mom, therapy is all about church. But as I started to slowly incorporate other things into the prayer during those sessions, I think that's been really helpful for her. So then I think the next step will then be, okay, let's see if we can talk to a therapist. So I think if you go slowly, and then also incorporate different things into things they're already familiar with, it's pretty helpful.
Yeah. That is amazing that you took that step to incorporate what your mom is already comfortable with and something different, because you are allowing her to see that it doesn't only have to be done one way. It doesn't have to be on one end of the spectrum. Again, going back to, you can have your prayer and you can go for a walk. You can have your prayer and you can have a therapist. So that's huge.
Yeah, because I noticed when I first started off with, let's do therapy, it was kind of like, no, I mean, I'm good with what I'm doing,
Right.
But
right.
Yeah, it's a slow process. Sometimes it's frustrating because you don't feel like you want to have to do all this stuff, but it's worth it in the end.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
So because
Hi,
of time,
sorry.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
This is Moji. How are you guys doing?
Hi, Moji.
I just wanted to buttress what the previous speaker just said. Like, I also have a mom who is, highly spiritual and prayerful. And, she's been through a lot throughout her, her lifetime. So introducing therapy to her is something that, is still a topic that we discuss. And because she tackles everything with prayer. That's what she wants to do. So I, took it upon myself to kind of like help her by talking her through things, slowly but surely. And also because of she's really, really African, so it's going to be hard for her to understand things from like, an American therapist point of view and vice versa. So there's like that, language barrier, there's that cultural, block and everything. But, maybe if I'm to find someone that is, that understands her culture, understands her language, maybe it would help her. But also she's still very adamant on, doing prayer. But with me and my siblings, we've been trying to like help her gradually, making sure that she's actually talking about things that has affected her, things that is going on, and helping her see how that is impacting her life right now, or even impacting the children, So like she said, it's a slow process, but we'll eventually get there.
Thank you for sharing that.
Can I add?
Sure.
Do you have time?
Sure.
Oh yeah. Hi everyone, this is Grace. I just wanted to add, in addition to what the two ladies that spoke before me said, as a therapist, I'm a believer that everyone needs therapy. But I think at the same time, everyone don't need to go to therapy to be okay. So I think sometimes when we're thinking about our families that are African and thinking about helping support them, I always like to say, think about impact, right? If your mom is obviously like being impacted by whatever she's experiencing in her life, and you see that her life is um significantly not going the way that she will hope. I feel like using that as a in to say, hey, let's do this thing. And therapy doesn't have to look like going to a therapist's office and talking to someone one-on-one. There are a lot of other things within communities. I think just like being aware of what's available in your community, because therapy is a process of becoming well, right? So it doesn't have to look like go to a therapist and have a one-on-one. Because my parent is very African as well, and I don't think that style of therapy might be impactful for her. So thinking about what other ways you can help support your family in becoming healthy, that doesn't have to look like the traditional therapy.
Right. Thank you for pointing that out, because that's very true. Therapy looks different. There's a lot of different ways that it could appear. All right, so like I said, I'm going to skip over this video, and we can share this PowerPoint with everyone afterwards so that you guys have it for reference later. All right, let's do, oops. Let's do this statement. We'll finish off with this. So I'll have a couple of panel members and then some folks in the audience to respond. I'm not doing anything that isn't good for my mental health. I know I've said that before. I'm assuming some of you guys have said that before. We say that, and then we get up and do that one thing that's not good for our mental health. All right, so Ms. Adama, tell us about this.
So for me, I'm the oldest on my mother's side, but I am one of 11 on my dad's side. And growing up and with just my two younger siblings in the home, I held a lot of responsibility in being the peacemaker and having multiple hats. I wasn't just the sister. I was sometimes the mother. I was sometimes the father. So I was forced to grow up at a very young age, and I essentially became the central person of keeping the family together. So 3 years ago, when I moved to Virginia to obtain my master's in social work and decided to stay here afterwards, even throughout that and even now, it's as if though that everyone is in the home, they still contact me and reach out to me to be that center person, to be the person to bridge the issues. And so a huge step and a huge thing that I've had to learn is setting boundaries and also enforcing for them to actually play the roles that they haven't played over the years. Because in actuality, what they would do is, well, Adama has all the answers. And it became to weigh on me and my mental health. And so I'm on a current journey of trying to separate that and being for Adama and for them to actually play the roles and try to talk through it rather than go to Adama for Adama to be the central focus. And that's something that I can attest to and acknowledge that I'm still working on.
Thank you for that. So what I'm hearing you say basically is that part of improving your mental health is empowering your family to learn how to take care of themselves.
Excuse me.
Yes.
This is Imani. I wanted to say solidarity to Adama. I am the oldest, and even though my mother has passed on and my youngest sister has passed on, there is still my brother and I. And my brother, he's 1 year younger than me, and he still expects me to rescue him whenever he has any problems. And I'm slowly, for my own mental health and that of my family, trying to encourage him to think for himself, use resources that are available to him. You know, you can check back with me, but do something on on your own first before running to me as the one with the cape on.
Right, right. Thank you, Imani. Appreciate you chiming in there. Teddy, tell us about this.
I very much agree with Adama, that I tended to, you know, play a role. You know, I was playing the role of peacemaker. You know, I was very clear on, you know, me being the youngest and me being very, oh man, I just felt everything, such an empath growing up, and I felt like I needed to absolve everything or solve everything. And, you know, I'm not doing anything that isn't good for my mental health. I found that I would be doing things to myself, you know, that I didn't think it was like a sign of anything. But the older I got, the more self-awareness I came into, and I was able to see, wow, maybe, oh man, look at these patterns, look at these habits that I have, and it's all a result of what's going on up here. It's all a result of the weight that I'm feeling. And I realized that not only were the things that I was trying to control or trying to solve, or the feelings or whatever I was trying to absolve in my own family and personal life, not only were those things an issue, but I was also contributing to my own breakdown. And I was like, man, wow. And yeah.
I like how you ended that, because it is important. And I think Chinomso alluded to this earlier, that there are a lot of parts we are responsible for as well. And we have to own that. Franklin, let's hear it. I'm not doing anything that isn't good for my mental health.
I would definitely say I am not doing anything that isn't good for my mental health, and I would use overextending myself to be like the main one. Growing up, I didn't really have my parents around, even though they were both active. They were working and providing for me, but I lived with other people. So that would make me feel like I had to, because I feel like they were going out of their way to take care of me. So I would go out of my way to make sure that I was like exemplary. So that way of surviving followed me towards my adult life, where even from my business to friendships to romantic partnerships, I would just overextend myself. So I'm unlearning that and learning that it is actually very important to be selfish with myself first and create boundaries, and then be able to be there for other people. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Sitawa, how about you?
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I have grown with living with a mental health condition, bipolar, and that led me to starting an organization that provided support and started a free SMS line. I've done TED Talks, spoken at the UN, and done all those things. And I was doing all these things as I was dealing with my own mental health journey, like recovery and healing journey. And so it got to a point I found that I was doing a lot more for the movement and what many other people needed, and being a voice for many other people and being there for many other people. And in the process, I was neglecting myself. And so 2 or 3 years ago, I started asking myself, what does Sita really want? Yes, I want to expand my advocacy work. Yes, I want to make sure a lot more people can be able to be self-advocates, can be able to sit at all these policy meetings, can be able to speak at all these spaces, but what do I really, really want for myself? And that has been a journey I've been on. I decided to go back to school, which is something that I dropped out of due to my own my journey, my illness, and all that. And so it's been hard because I know I needed resources and information and all the things we've talked about through this discussion today. And so I always want, if someone reaches out, I always want to help them. But then I need to remind myself that, oh, you're slowly going back into that thing that you told yourself that you should be getting out of. So so that's it's an on and off journey. There are days I win and there are days I do not do so well, but I keep trying. Yeah.
No day is perfect, right? But you're trying, like you said, and that's really what matters. And those who have been through an experience, naturally, not always, but naturally you have this desire to help someone else get through it. And like you said, we often get lost in that advocacy and we stop taking care of ourselves. So I appreciate that. Chinomso, how about you on this one?
Yes, I mean, I think I'll start with something that, I can probably control the most, which is, I think we really underestimate the impact of sleep on our mental health. We live in a culture that's hashtag team no sleep, but actually your mind needs a lot of rest. So I think that's something that I always say I will do, but I always neglect to do, and sleep is very important. And I think from that, then everything else trickles down. So if you're interested in learning more about the impact on sleep on your life or mental health, there's a great book out there called Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. So it really was eye-opening. So I try to get my sleep. I protect my sleep with my life, and I would encourage other people to do the same.
Thank you for that, Chinoso. Can you do me a favor and drop that in the chat so that people can use that as a resource and follow up on that book?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Edney, tell us about this statement here.
So with this statement, I'm a little bit of Adama, Teddy, Franklin, all mixture into all. I'm the oldest grandchild and oldest child on my mom's side. And when I moved to be closer to my family, I just saw all the dysfunction and I wanted to save my family so badly. I wanted to add peace. I wanted them to come together and just wanted to help them in their personal lives. So I started overextending myself. And then also because my mom sees so highly of me, which I'm grateful. So she'll even her friends like call Idney, and you know this. Oh, you need to talk to this person. Call. You need to talk to a lawyer. Call Idney. You need to go to a doctor. Call Idney. Everything is Idney. So I have to acknowledge that I did that too by overextending myself to the point, and then because I wanted to save them, and I mentally destroyed myself. And that's like I know destroy is like a strong word, but it's the truth, and that's something that I had to acknowledge that I had a role in doing that as well. So now I'm trying to just have them detached from me, which is so hard because they're also attached because they so used to call me for everything. And again, being the oldest grandchild and then the oldest one to a single mother is very, that's a whole other conversation. So now to have them detached, which is hard because they're also attached. So I have to do that in order to take care of my mental health and just learning to say, I can't help you with this. Just like I can go on Google to search the number, you can too, or I can talk to the lawyer, just you can too. So it's just doing that. I definitely, by trying to save my family as the oldest grandchild, and I tend to destroy myself. So I have to get myself back because I have a little bit of me in every single member of my family, and I need to like grab her back so I can be whole again.
Makes sense. I like that math. All right, let's go to Precious, and then it is 3:28. So Precious, if you could give us your response to this, then we've got a closing slide, and then we will wrap up.
Okay, I know I'm going to deviate a little bit because I have something that's on my heart. Since I have a spotlight, I'm going to ask if there's any member in the audience, a member of the clergy, a member in ministry, who can give us some information or give us a comment about the role of the church on mental health when people come to you. I know a lot has already been discussed, people have already made some comments, but I would like to hear from somebody, if we have somebody in the audience, a member of clergy.
I'm Bertha Lawani. I'm not a clergy, but I'm an active participant in my church. I'm a minister in my church as well. And I think that the conversation that has been ongoing has been really, really impressive to me. In the beginning, we're talking about church, spirituality, as well. I'm a nurse practitioner as well, and I'm a Nigerian. So I really kind of have a cohesive awareness about mental health, either personally in my family or in my professional life as well, and in church. Just as a disclaimer, it depends on, like there's somebody that mentioned that psychotherapy therapy is not just going to sit in front of another counselor. Therapy can come in many shapes and diverse form. And there was another statement that somebody had said earlier that it depends on the awareness, culturally competent care in every aspect of healthcare, be it mental health or any form of care that you're providing to patients. It has to be culturally competent. Even as a nurse practitioner, when I used to work as a nurse working in med-surg floor, if an African person comes to be admitted in the hospital, you have to know things to provide quality care. If an Indian person comes, you have to know what to provide quality care. Likewise, in mental health as well. So in the church setting, when we're talking about spirituality, in African spirituality, it's not just church. Even the African gods on its own, that's spirituality. So I don't just want us to label like it's church, it's Christianity. There are many religions, even the African religion in all diverse in Africa, that it's something that every African holds tenaciously. Even before Christianity came in, we already have our own spiritual worship. And even in mental health, that drives in also as well. But now coming back to the church, I'm going to use my church as an example. In my church, we have multiple doctors, we have multiple nurse practitioners, nurses, CNA. I'm going to tell you in my church, because of the culturally competent awareness Christianity, in my church on Sunday service, we devote the whole service just to talk about mental health. So we talk about it realistically. And if you want to go to the Bible as well, there were people with mental issues in the Bible. And God, I'm spiritual. I'm not going to hide that. But it's not spirituality that will become fanatical. You see, when we're talking about Christianity in Africa, I want you to know that many Africans brought the traditional form of worship to Christianity, where we are suspicious,
Bertha,
where we are afraid of.
Bertha, I'm going to interrupt you really quickly. If you could just do me a favor and try to kind of wrap it up, because we do have to move on. It's 3:32, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to make sure that we are respectful of everyone's time today.
Absolutely. I think I made my point across that Christianity, spirituality is also a form of therapy. I will round it up like that. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And you are absolutely correct, right? So again, it mirrors that, just like you said, and as Grace was saying earlier, it comes in so many different forms. And each form works effectively or ineffectively, depending on what that person actually needs.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So in closing, let's see. Name one thing you hope to continue. I'll pick out one panel member and one audience member. Please do me a favor and keep your response short so that we can transition out. I'll go with Adama. Can you let us know one thing that you have gotten out of today's chat?
It's always empowering to know that despite us coming from different backgrounds, we all have similar experiences or have been able to truly come one with ourselves in order to truly be the change agent in the community and within our families and within our friends. So we essentially have to clean our own backyard in order to be a better servant to others in our respectful fields. So for me, one thing I've gotten out of today's chat is that it's never too late, and that it's all about the perspective and how we aspire to impact and be present for ourselves in order to be present for others, but also setting the boundaries and also breaking those chains and generational curses in order to be the change that needs to come and form that. So
thank you, appreciate that. And for our second one, name one thing, and this is for any audience member who is willing to respond. Name one thing you hope to continue advocating for as it relates specifically, not to everyone else, but specifically your mental health. Going once, going twice.
Hi, this is Victoria. I'm going to say the one thing I am taking away from this is to understand that, well, a lot of people do have similar experiences, and I am not alone. So therefore, I have to be patient with myself. I also have to understand the power of communication. I listened to most of the conversation that was going on, and I am an immigrant from Nigeria, and I remember we used to joke about this when we were in college, how, well, Africans don't get depressed. Well, that's a big lie, because I grew up realizing that not only do Africans get depressed, Africans also suffer greatly from just being quiet. So a lot of things that I have been doing with my life is learning to ask for help and knowing that there's no shame in not being able to do something. And there's no shame in feeling the way you feel. So when you need it, ask for help.
Thank you, Victoria. I appreciate you chiming in with that. So what I'm hearing you say is you're going to continue making sure that you advocate to ask for help when you need it.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Before I finalize the closeout, Rita, do you have anything to say or share or add? You're on. There we go.
First of all, I would like to thank you, Natasha, for once again leading this and spearheading this. We did it for the first time last year in May, which is National Mental Health Awareness Month. And then this year we decided to do it in July because it's Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. So thank you for organizing the panelists and getting all of this together. Thank you, panelists, for joining us and being so open and candid about your experiences and sharing them with us. Audience members who joined us, thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday to join us and help us, the community, talk about something that is so important and at the same time so often ignored and belittled within our community. So hopefully we have made a lot of headway today. Of course, we were here for only 2 hours, so there's only so much we can do. But I want to tell you that everybody who was in the chat today, I will be sending a follow-up email and a thank you email. I will include all of the information that was relayed in the chat and any additional ones that Natasha and I want to include. So in conclusion, what I would say is, as I had alluded to earlier, we need to be culturally stronger and more aware in order to be just stronger people, mentally, emotionally, you name it. So that's what we are doing in our nonprofit organization. It's small, it's new, and we need your help. Any way you can help, don't ever think, oh, there's nothing I can do. Everybody's capable of doing something. And sometimes the smallest thing that you think you are doing and is insignificant may be the one thing we're looking for. So we, Natasha and I and other people who have volunteered, are doing this out of the passion that we feel for our people, for our culture. So we would love for you to join us in any capacity, whether it's just attending, and excuse me for saying just, whether it's attending events or volunteering or however else you see fit to help us, would be greatly appreciated. So please visit TACA, that's TACA757.org. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, and we try to do many things. Of course, mental health is one. We are also a community partner in education with Virginia Beach City Public Schools. And there are lots of things that we want to do, and we want to engage the community, but we want you to help us, because together we can go far, and together we can reach many, many people. So thank you.
Yes, thank you to all. And I'm just the only other thing I'm going to say is our events are the bomb. I just want to put that out there. Afro-Mania, if you haven't visited the pages yet, please do, because like Rita said, we do so many other things. So like she said, being involved in the schools, we have, events at our local malls, fashion shows, we've brought down artists, we've done so many things to become stronger and bridge the gap, right? So the African diaspora, from the continent to everywhere else, we are one. We come together. We have conversations, we build, we break those generational curses, and we're powerful. So I'm gonna leave you guys with that. Till next time, I appreciate my panelists. Thank you to all of the guests who were able to participate, for everyone who was comfortable enough with sharing. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Yes.
Thank you. And you all are invited to come to my neighborhood anytime.
Thank you.
I would love to have an event in my district, Lambert's Point, Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay, great. Let's make it happen.
I'm ready.
Yes, so
Thank you so much.
In the email that I send you, you can reply and tell me anything you'd like. It will be coming from me, so feel free.
Thank you,
so
everyone.
much, everyone.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a nice day.
And please stay safe.
I need to